Hello to everyone that's joining us today. Thank you very much for coming and for being interested in the Lancaster programme. This is our Future Applicants event, so this is something that we run every year for people who are interested, I guess, in the Declan site at Lancaster. We hope to give you a little bit of a flavour of what our programme is about and also have the opportunity to answer any questions that you might have about joining us as well. Should have said at the beginning, I'm Stacey. I'm a clinical psychologist and a clinical tutor on the programme, and I'm also part of the selections and admissions team with Rob, who is also here today, and you'll hear from soon. So Rob's going to tell you all about our selections process, what you can expect if you're applying to us in 2026. Yeah, he'll give you some details about that in a little while. I'm also an ex-trainee of the programme, so not that long, well, no, quite a long time ago now. I was in the position of applying to the programme as well and had a great experience of being a trainee, and have recently returned, I guess, as a staff member on the programme. I think it's probably important to say that lots of us do come back, and that's really about the values and the ethos of the programme, and I guess the great experience, I guess, that I had as a trainee here as well. So we're hoping that this afternoon we can tell you a little bit about the programme, what we're about, and what you might need to consider if you're thinking of applying to us next year. So in terms of our plan for today, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to the Declan site at Lancaster, just so that you know what life is like, I guess, as a trainee here. Rob's going to talk you through the application process and anything that you might need to think about as part of that. We've then got some staff and trainees are joining us to talk about their paths into clinical training, because we really want to kind of think about the different ways in which people can come into the world of clinical psychology. So we're going to hear from Vicky, Georgina, Freya and Andrew, who are all going to give you a little bit of a flavour of their experiences and their paths into clinical training. We've then got Karen and Paul joining us from our public involvement network group, which is called LD Panda. So they're going to tell you a little bit about the qualities that they would look for in a clinical psychologist as well, because we thought that that might be really helpful to anyone who's thinking about applying for this as a career. We're hoping then that we're going to have a little bit of time at the end to answer any queries and questions that you might have, either about the Lancaster course or about the selections process as well. So we'll give a little bit of time for questions at the end. And if we could ask maybe that you keep them all to the end and we'll try and do them all at once, I think that would be really helpful rather than sort of stopping all the way through. So I hope that sounds all right for everyone. Just to sort of tell you a little bit about the programme, I guess to start off with, we have, I suppose, some values that are really at the heart of everything that we do. Inclusivity is one of them. And we're really proud, I guess, of a few of the things that make our programme a little bit different. So we were the first programme to have a public involvement network, and the first programme also to have a part-time route. So I'll tell you a little bit about that in a while, but that basically came from, I suppose, trying to think of ways in which we can support people to do clinical training if they weren't able to work full-time for whatever reason that might be. We're also really kind of interested in widening participation and thinking about how we kind of make clinical psychology a career for everyone. And that's really sort of reflected in our selections process. So we try to make that as inclusive as we possibly can. And we also do lots of project work around sort of widening participation and thinking about who might be sort of underrepresented in our profession at the moment. So Rob's going to tell you a little bit about that in a while and how that sort of works in terms of our selections process. We've also got lots of stakeholders who are a big part of our programme. So when we're making decisions or changes, we do that, I suppose, in consultation with a lot of stakeholders. We recently had a stakeholders event where we invited lots of sort of local clinicians, community services and trainees to sort of come together and think about what we're doing next as a programme. So we try our best, I guess, to be inclusive as possible, and it's very much one of our sort of values that we hold at the heart of everything that we do. Just to sort of give you a bit of a flavour of what it's like to be a trainee, if you come on the full-time route, a typical week for a full-time trainee is that you would have one day, no, that's not right. One day on having a study day at home, one day teaching in Lancaster, and 3 days on a clinical placement, which is usually in the NHS, I guess, or in a third sector. So that's what a typical week looks like for a full-time trainee. We often get asked a lot about the placements that we offer as part of our programme, and where you should live and where you should kind of base yourself, I guess, if you're going to come and be a trainee on the Lancaster course. Our placements are organised as part of a 3-course group. So we work with the other Northwest programmes to think about where to put people on clinical placements. We have 3 different 9-month clinical placements that we do. A direct skills placement, which is about your sort of clinical therapy skills. An indirect placement, which is about working with the team around the person. And then a leadership and influencing placement in the 3rd year. And that's sort of thinking about service development, how we might improve things, and how we might make changes, I guess, to the profession as well for the future. So there's 3 different 9-month clinical placements, and alongside that you also complete a project block where you're thinking about service improvement, and we have a community placement as well that you do in the 3rd year. So there's a real variety, I suppose, in the placements that you would complete as a Lancaster trainee, and in all of them you're working towards developing competencies and working with people across the lifespan. So we do our placements in a bit of a different way to some of the other programmes, but we make sure that you've had a range of experiences by the time you finish clinical training. Our placements are available across the Northwest, but when we're allocating placements, I guess we try our best to think about the location of people, where you live, and things like that. But we base our placement allocations off of learning needs and what competencies need to be developed next. So we can't always guarantee that a placement is going to be exactly where you live, if that makes sense. That's one of the questions that we typically get asked quite a bit about. In terms of research as a trainee, so that's something that we now get you started with right in the first few weeks and months of training. So our first years have just been to a day this morning, which is all around thinking about their research choices and what they want to focus on for the next 3 years. We are located as a programme within the Division of Health Research at Lancaster Uni, and we have a research team within the programme, but we also work with a lot of people who are, I guess, employed by the university, but part of the Division of Health Research. So when you're thinking about your sort of research topics, you'll probably be guided by whatever the specialisms are of the people involved. And we're really lucky that we've got quite a broad range, because we've got people, I guess, both within the programme and external to the programme, that can offer lots of different sort of ideas and specialisms. We also have very high levels of publications by trainees. So that's just, I guess, a testament to how successful we are at sort of supporting research on the programme as well. In terms of learning, so this is, I guess, your teaching day. We would expect that a trainee would come to Lancaster for face-to-face teaching for 1 day per week. We're accredited as a face-to-face programme, and the vast majority of what we offer does happen face-to-face. We have a campus, a building in Health Innovation 1. Most of our teaching takes place there, but sometimes we use, I guess, parts of the university as well. And we will offer teaching, I guess, face-to-face in a lot of different places. The teaching is all facilitated either by internal staff or external people, often clinical psychologists who work in the area, or people who've got a specific interest or like specialist knowledge in that particular area as well. The teaching offers, I guess, a broad range of topics to help you develop all of the competencies that you need throughout training. We quite often do a lot of our therapies teaching first, and then we move on to more sort of specialist things throughout the 3 years. And we've recently introduced speciality learning blocks that are all around, I suppose, specific areas of interest that people may or may not want to opt into. So some examples of those are working with people with learning disabilities, perinatal mental health, and forensic psychology as well. Those are just some examples, I guess, of the learning blocks that you might want to participate in. As I say, we are accredited as a face-to-face programme, so I would expect that if you apply to us, that you would expect to come to Lancaster 1 day per week, but we do sometimes have teaching online if that is what suits the session best. In terms of assessment, we don't have any exams at Lancaster, so we're a little bit different from some of the other programmes, I guess, in this way. You're being assessed all the time on your placement in terms of developing new clinical competencies. And we also have a number of pieces of coursework, I guess, that sort of relate to your placement activities. So there are assignments that are related to working clinically with people, and assignments related to things like service evaluation and audit. So everything that you're sort of doing is by coursework. We don't have any exams, and that obviously suits some people and not others. But all the assignments are sort of tapping into the clinical and research components that you need to be developing as a trainee. So that's our sort of full-time pathway and a little bit of a flavour of, I suppose, what you can expect if you want to be a trainee at Lancaster. I'm just going to let you know a little bit about our part-time route as well, because that's something that we offer and is quite different, I guess, from some of the other programmes. We first started offering this in September 2020, and I suppose one of the aims of that was to widen access to training for people who weren't able to study full-time. So before we had the part-time route, there were a lot of people, myself included actually, who were on a bespoke training pathway, and that meant they sort of did training at a little bit of a different pace to other people, but it was really difficult because you were often kind of in a cohort on your own. So we now have a part-time route that people can apply to if they wish to. How it works is that anyone on the part-time route works 0.7, which equates to about 26.25 hours per week. And it just means that your training is sort of done in a slightly different way to everybody else, although you cover exactly the same competencies and do the same assignments and everything else. So it takes 4 years and 4 months to complete training part-time. And we've actually got Georgina on the call with us today, who's going to tell us a little bit in a while about, I suppose, her experience of being a part-time trainee and some of what that can offer, if that's something that I guess you might be interested in. In terms of how the part-time route works, our selections process is the same whether you're applying full-time or part-time. So we don't actually know which one you want to apply for. You will choose that on the application form, and we select everybody as normal, and then we sort of find out who we've got on the part-time route and the full-time route after the selections process is done. In terms of assessment, again, it's the same as the full-time route in that you're completing exactly the same assignments as the full-time trainees. They're just sometimes placed at a bit of a different point, and that's because we want the assignments to fit, I guess, in line with the trainees' learning and development. You also get the same amount of study time as a full-time trainee, but again, it sort of happens over a longer period of time. So you would have half a day a week over the period of 4 and a bit years, rather than one full day every single week, if that makes sense. The teaching on the part-time route is the same as well, but part-time trainees, I guess, attend the sessions in a little bit of a different way. So they fit into different cohorts so that they can attend the sessions at the time that sort of fits with their sort of training, and the teaching is spread out over a greater period. So you get exactly the same teaching overall, but just at a little bit of a different time to the full-time trainees. Again, in terms of placements, The overall number of days that you're doing will end up being the same, but it's just spread over a longer time. And again, you're doing the sort of practice-based learning that's helping you to kind of develop those competencies and work across the lifespan. The difference is that the part-time placements are 13 months long instead of the 9-month placements that we have for our full-time trainees. And this is just a little bit of information, I guess, about the typical week. So if you did apply to the part-time route, then in practice, what this means is that you have 2 days a week on placement, 1 day of learning in Lancaster, and half a day of study at home. There is a little bit of flexibility in terms of how that works, but essentially that's how we try and set up our weeks for a part-time trainee. So I think that's the end of my section there. I realise that's a lot of information about the programme in sort of quite a short space of time, but if you have got any questions at all or anything you want to ask, please just save them up. I'll hand over to Rob now to talk about selections and admissions, and then we can come back to any questions about the programme at the end. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just get our slides up. I think one thing just to add at the end there is the part-time programme is open to everyone. You don't need to justify it. So there's no particular reason that you need to have to apply for the part-time or the full-time. You know, you can choose it for whatever reason you want. So if it's of interest to you, feel free to apply. Okay, I will fly through this. So this is talking about what we're going to do for applications that people are making now up until the end of November for entry in 2026. So if you're not familiar, the application process is usually for the year commencing the following year in effect. So you apply now to start next year. Okay, so we've tweaked things a little bit as we do most years compared to last year. So we now, instead of 4 steps to join the programme, we have 5 steps this coming year. First one, nice and straightforward, completing the clearinghouse application. So applications to the programmes across the UK through the clearinghouse. I will come on to some specifics around that in a moment. But if you are going to apply to us, you do have to do it through the clearinghouse. You can't do it direct to the university. Then we will do a screening test with everybody that applies to us that meets our minimum criteria, which is very, very straightforward. Again, I'll cover that in a sec. Then we've got a first interview with around 192 people. Then we'll be inviting around 120 people back for a second interview, both of which will be here at Lancaster face-to-face. And then there's a quick supervisory test for the 52 people that we offer a place to. So we'll be having 52 commissions again next year. Okay, so application form. Most important thing to remember in terms of a Lancaster application is that we don't read anything you put in the application form. No one believes us when we say this, but honestly, we won't read it. We get your contact details off it, and we confirm that you are eligible for GBC with BPS. Other than that, we don't touch it. You don't need to be a member of the BPS. People do get slightly confused here. You never need to join the BPS. You just need to be eligible. So don't feel that you have to join the BPS either before or after qualification. But of course you can if you want to. These are the questions I get asked a lot. We don't read it because there's no evidence that those application forms will predict the performance of trainees or in fact in any role. Applications, when written by someone, to say the things that people want to hear, they just don't predict very much. So that's why our entire application process is a bit different from elsewhere. What the application form is asking you, things like your educational history, those things are really influenced by your socioeconomic status, and that's one of the things that we want to change about how people get into the profession. If you are only applying to Lancaster, because we're not going to read it, you don't need to fill it all in. Some people only choose to apply here for whatever reason. If you can get away with just putting NA or skipping sections of the application form, then please do, because we won't see it. So minimise the workload for yourself. If you are applying elsewhere, you're going to need to fill it all in. So bear that in mind. If you're not at the point of applying and you're thinking about how do I gain experience, how do I maximise my chances of getting onto a programme, be that Lancaster or elsewhere. You're thinking about further qualifications like masters or PhDs. It's not something we can give you any steer on because we don't use that information in selecting trainees. What I would normally say is choose something you're going to enjoy, because it's crap otherwise. So, assuming you've applied this year, we get all the applications through by the end of January. Last year we had about 850 applications. I get all those details and we invite everybody to do our deductive reasoning test, apart from the people who don't have eligibility for GBC. Deductive reasoning test is effectively a test of flexibility of thinking, so taking a set of data, reinterpreting it and then choosing from a set of options. It's provided by a company called SHL. You can go have a play with a practice test. There's a link on our website, get a feel for what it's like. And we just get a set of scores on an approximately normal distribution that comes out at the end. So that's the spread of results that we get. We have a lot of people saying that, why do you use this? Because it's not what a clinical psychologist does. I think that Stacey would say she spends a lot of time doing the sort of things that this actually tests, but what it does is test that cognitive flexibility, uses scenarios that are outside of clinical psychology. So the general, I'm sat in an office type scenarios, I need to do something, I need to arrange a meeting, I've got 3 meeting rooms and everyone's got a different schedule, where am I putting people? So it's the sort of thing that can measure academic potential and complex thinking without needing to have that experience in clinical psychology or within a psychology sphere. We are able to provide extra time. We know from SHL they've been running these tests for decades. Hundreds of thousands of applications have gone through it, and we know the extra time will allow people to perform at their ability. So all you need to do is get in touch with us beforehand and let us know of any disabilities, and we can get that extra time applied. Okay. So we take all the scores from that, and only the scores, and we will invite the top 192 people to come and do a first round interview with us here at Lancaster. Those are on the 30th and 31st of March and the 1st of April. Because there's so many people over 3 days, you'll be coming in groups, quite a lot of groups, quickly working that out. You'll be doing most of the work in groups of 8. So we will have a group task where there'll be 8 candidates, a couple of stakeholders and a couple of staff members. You'll be chatting together about a particular scenario. Oop, I skipped onto the wrong one. There we go. Group task. 8 candidates, 2 stakeholders, and 2 members of the staff in an observed discussion. We'll be chatting about various scenarios. We'll just be observing your communication and taking some notes on that. You will then sit down with the whole group, probably 32 of you. You won't be chatting. You will be doing a written task on a laptop, probably writing about 500 words. We're just looking at your written ability skills. But obviously, you're coming in to do a PhD or a doctorate here, so we need to make sure that you're going to be able to operate at that level. Then there'll be a short individual role play, probably with one of our trainees, or it might be a member of staff. Be about 15 minutes long. Again, just looking at how you communicate, see what sort of relationship you form with the person that you're working with there. And then there'll be a bit of feedback with somebody just to have a chance to discuss how things went during the day. Okay, so that'll be a half day. From those, we will invite 120 probably people to come back for another half day. We've got 5 days set aside for those 120 people, or it's a couple of weeks later. Okay, again, be here at Lancaster in Health Innovation 1. Tasks slightly different. So there will be another role play. It'll be a little bit longer, a little bit harder, probably a bit more challenging. There'll be a video task where you watch a video and then discuss with the panel what was going on in a social scenario. So all of these things are non-clinical. You don't need any clinical experience. We're not looking for people who are half trained as a clinical psychologist. You can come here without that assistant psychology background. That's absolutely fine. And then the third bit of the second round interview will be an individual Q&A where we'll be asking you questions about things where we're looking to interrogate your ability to show the competencies that are listed on our website. All of this is on our website. If you want to go read about the competencies we use, they're all there. There's nothing in here that's surprising or secret. It's all on our site. Okay, so from the second round interviews, that's where we'll choose the 52 people we're going to make an offer to. Once we've made offers, there's that one last hurdle that we ask people to jump over, which everyone gets really stressed about, but it's not a problem, it's dead easy, which is redoing the screening test again. So I ask people to book in a time with me where they can do a Teams call like this. They'll sit there and do the test again, while I twiddle my thumbs, have a cup of tea. I'm flexible on when we book that in, so the person gets to choose when they do it. My advice is always relax about it. You've done it once, you've got a brilliant score to come to interview, so you can do it again. And people that don't panic never have any issues. In fact, it's been many, many, many years since we've had a problem. We give a big chunk of flexibility to people because we know it's stressful. And then we have the chance for a lovely chat where we can talk about what's going to happen in the future when contracts start, where they might be moving to, that sort of thing. So it's actually quite a nice process. So that's how you get on the programme, basically. It's dead straightforward. A few final things to cover. You do not need a driving licence to be a trainee at Lancaster. Some programmes do ask for that. We do not. But we are based at Lancaster. Our services are spread out across the northwest. You may get placed further away from your home than you might want to be. We will support you to do that if you don't drive or don't have access to a car. But it will make life easier if you do have a driving licence and a car. But then that's life. Contracts with the Trust, so you'd be employed by Lancashire and South Cumbria NHS Trust, LSCFT. They always start on the 1st of September. Your first day at work would be either the 1st if that was a weekday or the next day after that. And throughout this process, when applying and once you're here, it's really important to remember this is a job, it's a well-paid job, and we have expectations of trainees and applicants as people who are applying for a job. So you need to bear that in mind. It will help you in that process and it will help us in helping you get through it. Okay. Butter pies. This is to remind me to tell you the most important thing throughout the process of trying to get onto the doctorate at Lancaster, and it's to show yourself. So over the last couple of weeks, we've had quite a few conversations here on the programme about if you were a pie, what sort of pie would you be? And being a Prestonian, I would definitely be a butter pie. It also happens to be my favourite pie, but it's the one I'd be. That's what we're like at Lancaster. We show ourselves and we enjoy it and we have a lot of fun in the process. And if you come to interview with us and be yourself and show yourself, good chance you're going to do really well, because that's where we see the love and the empathy and the warmth. So that would be my advice to anyone, is all the other stuff aside, come and enjoy yourself and show yourself and you'll do well. Okay, that's me, Stacey.
Thank you very much, Rob. Yes, also a fan of a butter pie. So, you don't have to like them though. That's I'll put that out there. You can choose your own pie if you'd like to be a trainee. Okay, can I hand over to Vicky? Are you okay to share your experiences? So Vicky is a clinical tutor on the programme and she's going to talk a little bit about her journey into clinical training.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Oh, the presentation's gone down. So I'm Vicky. I will start. I didn't train at Lancaster on the Declan Side programme. I trained elsewhere. So I joined the team as a clinical tutor. And I guess, yeah, just because of the ethos of the team, having met other trainees who trained here whilst I was training, and having worked with colleagues who trained at Lancaster, that was the reason why I wanted to work in the programme, as well, because I didn't have any experience of what the doctorate programme was like before joining the sort of the clinical tutor team, really, in terms of being a trainee. So I guess my background is slightly different in terms of it's not being the typical assistant route. I would say my background came from more of a research pathway into clinical psychology. So there are, I guess, yeah, it's just sort of to say that you don't have to go down, like Rob said, that typical route. You can come from very different avenues, and mine predominantly was a research background. I did my undergraduate at Lancaster University, and it was during that time I was out what I wanted to do, and I didn't have a clue at this point. So I decided to do a master's, because that's what you did back then. And I also got a job working with people in a vocational rehab role within a acquired brain injury sort of service. So I worked part-time, and I also completed a master's, which made me realise how much I enjoyed research, and in particular research that was starting to have an impact on helping understand where people might be struggling, or difficulties, what might help people. And from that, I'm within my job as a sort of vocational rehab, working alongside, it was occupational psychologists I predominantly worked alongside. I then thought about, where do I go next? And that took me down to thinking about and applying for PhDs. And I was then given and sort of had to go through a whole interview process, and was given a studentship for a PhD in Birmingham, at the University of Birmingham. And that's where I spent the next 3 years working very closely within a brain injury rehab unit, exploring why people did or didn't use memory strategies, and what would help facilitate people to after an acquired brain injury to understand and sort of rehab people working within rehabilitation, so psychologists, but OTs, physios, speech and language therapists, and also family members as well. So thinking about what understanding why loved ones may not use memory strategies when their family members were tearing their hair out about why they kept losing keys and having the doors locked, and not being able to get back in the house after sort of different acquired brain injuries. And also sort of not meeting appointments, and sort of it having a massive impact on people's lives. So I spent 3 years working alongside a clinical psychologist as an honorary assistant within the rehab unit, and working in so getting an understanding, but then developing research as well. And it was really important. And I think research is often, sometimes people think it's a tag along to the clinical doctorate, that it's not something that, I just need to do it as part of, it's just one tick box. What I would say is research that you really enjoy is actually, it opens up a lot in terms of, and being able to do research well allowed me to understand when I was training, and not only when I was trained but and qualified, how to write for different aspects of the programme. So not only the academic aspects, but when I went into clinical placement, how I then could write for different letters, therapeutic letters, knowing how to adapt for different audiences, because during my PhD I presented to sort of MDT colleagues. I presented to those who'd attended the rehabilitation units. I presented at national and international conferences, again, like to academic peers, and those who were sort of very big in the world of brain injury. So for me, having that research background I felt and I feel, and I'm really passionate about research, and I think research that was really translational. So for me, doing the PhD made me realise about wanting to do research within settings and clinical that actually made a difference and could be used clinically and to help people and help services develop and understand better the people that they're supporting. So for me, that research, doing that PhD, helped to consolidate that for me in terms of the type of clinical psychologist that I wanted to be. And it also helped me understand that I wanted to be a clinical psychologist at the same time. Seeing what the work that people did clinically and therapeutically within the rehabilitation unit. So after my PhD, I then thought about what I sort of needed in terms of experience and where maybe I lacked experience. And I did feel that that was working clinically. I had done other areas of voluntary work whilst I was doing my PhD, working on other research programs and collecting data for other, at the time, clinical psychology doctorate trainees. I helped collect their data for them, and so I'd done a lot of that experience. But for me, so that had given me a lot of understanding of the importance of research and working clinically, and the utility of all the research skills, not only on just being able to produce a thesis, but the importance of being able to write, to synthesize information, to when you're thinking about sort of then academic papers, the information you're taking from that and how you then think about it, how you might then apply it clinically. But I didn't have that experience, so I then applied, and at the time of I was then a PWP. So I did the training as a psychological wellbeing practitioner, working in mental health services, where I worked for around 2 years before applying for the doctorate and programme and attending one of the other training programmes. I didn't get on at Lancaster, but I did train elsewhere. So yeah, so I guess then in terms of the PWP, that was very much then gaining that clinical experience of working with people in a low intensity setting in terms of GP surgeries. And I think that was really helpful in terms of understanding sort of how different systems work. So and I think any experience where you can get an understanding of sort of systems and how you work with others that aren't in the same profession as you is really important. The PhD and doing the academic route also taught me that as well, in terms of working with OTs, physios, speech and language therapists, and thinking about sort of their roles within sort of supporting an individual with brain injury. I also worked in with sort of third-party sectors in terms of sort of headway and those services, so being able to liaise with them. Again, they have about that whole how you develop sort of your communication skills, being able to work with people of that aren't bound by the same NHS ethics and things, but then the needing to work and think about how you'd work in those organisations was really important. And I think for me, the take-home message was that research, particularly research that's translational, is across clinic, is really important, and it's not just an add-on to clinical psychology. And for me, it teaches you a lot, as I said, about how to organise yourself, how to plan, thinking about your writing skills, how to translate what you want to different audiences, and being confident in being able to do that as well. So I think having a research background, if there's anyone out there who is on that pathway or thinking about that pathway, I think it brings a lot of positives as well. And that is definitely the skills that you will bring to the training.
Thanks so much, Vicky. That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if you can stay, but it might be helpful if you can kind of
Yeah.
stay till the end, and then if anyone's got any questions, particularly about like research experience or anything, because that's something that, yeah, is quite unique, isn't it, to your journey? Thank you so much. Georgina, can I ask you to go next, please? I think you're going to talk about your journey into training and also your experience of the part-time route, if that's okay.
So hi everybody,
Thank
I'm
you.
Georgina. I'm now in my just at the beginning of my 4th year, so I've only got 4 months left. I finish in December. So I'll just share a little bit about me. I originally did a neuroscience and psychology degree back in 2008, I think it was, and originally did want to pursue a career in psychology, clinical psychology, but for various reasons, it didn't feel appropriate in my life at the time, and I chose a slightly different career route that I hoped would meet what I was hoping for from clinical psychology. So I trained as a clinical scientist. So at the time that meant doing a master's in audiology and then 3 years on the job training as a clinical scientist. And then I worked for a long time as a clinical scientist in various capacities, up to leading parts of service. So my background is quite different. I don't have any clinical psychology assistant post roles or anything like that in my background, and didn't even think that it would be a possibility to come to clinical psychology. And I'd sort of not looked. I thought, oh, there's nowhere that they'll have me because I've not got that background, and that's what I thought you had to have to do this job. And then came across Lancaster, and so I am one of those people that Rob mentioned that only applied to Lancaster. This was where I wanted to go, but I did do the form, and I knew that no one would read it, but I did it anyway. And in sort of from my perspective, I found it helpful just to write down why I wanted to do it. So it was helpful, even though I knew no one was going to read it. So yeah, I went for the part-time route as well. So that the big selling points for me at Lancaster were that they weren't expecting a ready-made psychologist, which I found really valuable. I really liked the values that Lancaster talk about and do show through the way that they not only recruit but through the programme, particularly the focus on social justice. And obviously the part-time route made it a possibility for me. So I had just had a little girl when I started the course. So I started when my daughter was just turned 1. So if it hadn't have been for the part-time course for me, I wouldn't have changed career. So it's been invaluable for me to be able to take this career change. In terms of what it's been like to be a trainee and to be a part-time trainee, I've really enjoyed the process. It's got ups and it's got downs like anything. So I'd say in terms of the positive experiences, I've got a really good group of friends, and it's across cohorts, and I think that's possibly something that's a little bit unique about being part-time, because there's people that are either maybe gone off on maternity leave or had to take breaks for whatever reason, and we've ended up with this really lovely cohort across many years of people who all support one another, and that's been a really big positive for me and for all my colleagues that have either now finished training because they were ahead in terms of the cohorts or are still going through the training. I've really loved the research. I was supported and able to do a piece of research that was really dear to me. I wanted to research something called hyperemesis gravidarum. I wanted to research what it was to the psychological impacts of that, and was supported by the course and by my research tutor to be able to do that, and I've really loved that, and I've been really well supported. And similarly, from a personal tutor perspective, I've had a really strong support from the course, which has been invaluable, because there are times where it's challenging. There are times that things maybe don't go quite right, maybe on placement or relational challenges, and that support's really important, and I've been very well supported by the course. In terms of challenges, I'd say there is a bit of a higher cognitive load for being part-time. And it's sort of something to bear in mind. You've got less hours in the week that you're technically working, and sometimes you've still got quite a lot to fit in that time, or you're juggling things or trying to work out what teaching and where. And so there are some challenges around cognitive load. Um, but I would say any challenges that have come up, the course have listened and have heard and have tried to make changes that was within their resources. So although, yeah, there are challenges, I think that is life, and it's been positively handled and managed as well as it could have been. Yeah, so in terms of the part-time route, as I said, if it hadn't have been for it, I wouldn't have been able to change career. And I'm so eternally grateful that I've had this opportunity. I love this career. I'm due to finish soon and due to start my qualified job in January. And yeah, I would really recommend Lancaster as a course. And I would really recommend the part-time route as a way to go through this training if there's any reason why you can't or don't want to work full-time. Because I would say even before I had my daughter, I'd already chosen to go part-time for my own well-being. So even if there's not a reason, I would still say the part-time route is a good option, and it's open. So that's me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Georgina. I'm aware that you've got to go at the end, so I just wondered if anybody who's listening has any questions specifically about the part-time route. Would it be all right to ask them now? Just we'll kind of go a little bit off. If there's any questions at all about that.
Feel free to type them in the chat if you want to.
Yeah, and I guess if anything comes to you later, I can try and answer them, I suppose from a tutor perspective, but just sort of thinking if there's something that they wanted to ask you specifically.
Just in terms of Georgina having no NHS experience, that's not unusual, both within our applicants and within our cohorts. Around approximately 1 in 5 of our trainees has no NHS experience.
And I'd say, Rob, that was part of the sort of made it a real strength in terms of cohorts. My cohorts moved on over a year ago, but there were people with really interesting backgrounds, and it makes the conversation so much more fruitful, I suppose.
I guess just to say as well, I didn't put it on the slides at the beginning, but we have something called like an NHS shadowing thing that you do in the induction period. So if you come in and you haven't had any sort of like clinical psychology or NHS experience before, that's fine, because you've got like a little bit of time in the first few weeks to go and meet a psychologist, see what, a bit more about what it's all about. And yeah, it's okay, I suppose, to come from different contexts. Right, I don't think there's any, oh, sorry. Is that a question there? No. Okay. So I don't think there's any questions as such. So, but thank you, Georgina.
No.
Just, yeah, I know you might need to pop out at some point, but if there is any, I can always send them on afterwards as well.
Thanks, and good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Freya, can I come to you next, please, to share your journey into training?
Yeah. Hi.
Thank you.
So my name's Freya. I'm a second year trainee at the minute at Lancaster, and I took quite a strange route in, I suppose. I did my undergrad in psychology, but I'd planned initially to be a psychology teacher. So I went and did a PGCE and taught high school and college psychology along with other subjects. And kind of when I was teaching, I realised that I wanted to focus more on well-being. That seemed less of a focus of teaching. And I noticed a lot of the children and the teachers were struggling with their mental health. And I realised I wanted to spend more of my time focusing on that. So after I'd completed my teaching year, I went and worked at a special educational college, and worked with like a variety of different types of students, with different types of diagnoses. And during that time, I really got a lot of experience with kind of adapting my practice, working with different professionals like OT and physio and nurses that were on site. And I worked in their behaviour department, helping put together things like positive behaviour support plans. And from that experience, I realised I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. I kind of discovered the role through the experience rather than the other way around, which I think was a really nice way to get into it. And I found the skills I'd learned working within the special educational needs college really helpful to then get an assistant post for me. So I went and worked in a learning disability service and had lots of applicable skills. But also I remember in my Lancaster interview speaking about personal experiences as well, because I think they're really important to reflect on. So for me, I had some time caring for my granddad. And so I was able to kind of think about how I was able to balance that experience with work, what kind of skills that brought in terms of speaking to different professionals, what it felt like from the other side of things, and being a carer. And so I think even without the assistant experience, you can kind of reflect on a lot of different types of experiences that help with getting onto the course and throughout the course as well. So I brought things like teaching experience, the organisation, kind of balancing personal and professional life, and adapting and creating different resources and speaking to lots of different people. And I think you can really develop those skills in lots of different ways. For me, it was my second time applying for Lancaster. The first time I applied, I actually didn't get to interview. So it was a nice surprise for me the second time. I think sometimes what can happen is if you don't do well on the test the first time round, you can think, oh, I'm not going to be any good the second time or third time, but actually I had a very different experience the second time, got to interview and then got on the course, and I'm really enjoying the course and find it very supportive. But it does have a lot of people in our year group have a lot of different experiences. Not everyone's been an assistant, not everyone's worked in the NHS. Some people have come from completely different backgrounds, which is really nice.
Oh, thanks so much, Freya, and thanks for talking about your experience of the interview as well, because I think that's really helpful for people to hear, and how the sort of the skills you've gained in other things will translate across. So thank you very much. That's brilliant.
Good to underline that we don't privilege NHS and AP experiences over personal experiences in whatever form that's happened in your life. I think our clinical director, currently acting program director, Anna, always uses the example of working in a bar as being some of the best examples of her interpersonal development, and that's what she would use. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Andrew, are you okay to go next? Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, so my name's Andrew. I'm also just started my second year, like Freya, on the programme. So again, I had kind of an unusual route into the training, a non-traditional route. So the majority of my experience came from GP practice, so more in a physical health environment. So I worked in a team that was called the R's roles in GP practice, which basically is additional roles that aren't traditional to a GP practice, so not your GP, nurses, healthcare assistants. And within that role, we focused on the wider determinants of health that might affect people and be a reason for people to attend a GP practice. So specifically for me, that was looking at the impact of long-term health conditions, the impact of mental health on physical health, and the impact of social concerns. So financial issues, housing issues, social isolation, and how all of this could impact someone's physical health. So after approximately kind of 2 years of doing that, doing a lot of the more face-to-face intervention-based work, I was offered the opportunity to become manager of the team that I was working in, and that was what I did for the 3 years before getting my place on the course. At the time, I remember being offered that position and having a little bit of a dilemma of whether it was actually what I wanted to do, because it did feel a little bit like I was stepping away from some of the clinical work. Even though it was a dual role and I would still be doing some of the patient-facing work, a lot more of my days became a lot more around the leadership and management. But what it actually meant was I managed to develop a lot of additional skills. So a lot of the leadership and management skills. We also didn't have a HR team, so I got to learn about all the HR processes and recruitment, onboarding. But as well as that, there was a lot of opportunity as a commission service to go through all the commissioning of an NHS service. as well as service development, and my new role within a management position also led to a lot more MDT working. So it led to a lot more working within the GP practices with all the additional roles that are attached to GP services, but also outside of that, doing a lot more MDT working with additional services, so third sector services, adult social care, and how we could integrate that work much better together within the community. So then when it came time to applying to the course, I think Lancaster really stood out to me with the different application process. So I really felt that I had the competencies to be a good trainee on a course, but I just didn't necessarily have the traditional assistant clinical psychologist experience. So I'd not been in a service that was led by psychology. I'd not had psychology supervision. Kind of any psychological informed work came more from kind of what the team had experienced in their other roles before coming into the team that I worked in. And I think echoing kind of what was said by Freya at the end of hers and Rob's, kind of the way that the interview process is done, it didn't mean that I needed a specific clinical experience to answer the questions. I was able to answer them both with my work and personal experience that I'd had, and still meet all the kind of 10 competencies that is looked at against.
Oh, thank you so much, Andrew. Do you want to, I don't know, I'm putting you on the spot a bit here. Do you want to say a bit about what it's been like being a trainee? Because I know we were talking about this the other day and how it sort of fits with the different bits of training. Because I know you've sort of brought a lot of experience that, I don't know.
So not having the traditional route in, I came in with no clinical kind of therapy experience. So this first year has been a lot of new information for me, and a lot of learning in terms of the traditional clinical therapy skills. But that's been really well scaffolded both with placement and university. And I think there's been a big awareness of like that was completely new for me. So there has been much more scaffolding around that. Going into second year, we've just started kind of more the influencing and leadership type work. And it's sort of a little bit like coming home for me, because it's probably what I feel more comfortable in. But I think as well as a cohort, it's something that we've been able to bounce off each other. So as a cohort, we're kind of a really kind of close cohort. We all get on and we'll, like I've been able to bounce stuff off of people who have much more of that like AP clinical experience within my first year. And now the tables have turned a little bit and a lot of questions directed potentially my way in some of our sessions about my experience of some of those things. But yeah, it's been really nice to be scaffolded and be able to utilize the skills that I've got, but then develop the new ones.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Andrew. Just when we were sort of talking the other day, I was thinking there's so many experiences that you're bringing in from having that different experience before training. So yeah, thank you. Right, lovely. Okay, so hopefully, I guess that gives people who are listening a bit of a flavour of the range of different experiences that people have as trainees. And yeah, I think as staff, we can all think of many examples of people who have had just completely different routes into training. So it's all about kind of thinking about the competencies broadly, where you've got those skills, and think about your personal experience as well and how that maps on. So yeah. Okay, so I won't talk anymore. I'm going to hand over now to Paul and Karen. I don't know if you've got a preference of who goes first. Don't really mind. You're going to talk a little bit about the qualities, I guess, that you'd look for.
Sorry, Stacey, I don't actually mind going first, if that's okay with you, Paul.
Perfect. Yeah, so you're going to talk about qualities that you would look for in a clinical psychologist.
Yeah, I'll just give you a bit of an introduction. I've had various diagnoses, OCD and hoarding disorder, depression, which is very genetically driven in my family. I've had CBT, exposure response prevention therapy, psychodynamic counselling, Gestalt, that didn't go very well, and compassion focused therapy. What I'd like to say to you is that I think you probably have about 5 seconds to make a good impression. And research has shown this, that people make their decisions about anybody very, very quickly. So I think in those 5 seconds, you have to do it. You have to project confidence that you are the real deal. You are the Wizard of Oz. You're not somebody behind a screen, you know, with a trying to run a film. You are the real thing. And secondly, that you can be that Wizard of Oz for the person in front of you, because it's not just whether this person is any good, it's whether they will do it for me. I think a lot of the Rogerian principles of person-centered counselling are very relevant here. So you can be a psychologist straight out of central casting, but you need to bring something of yourself. So you have to be authentic. You have to bring your sense of humour, your quirkiness, your life experiences to a certain extent. I'm not talking about making the intervention about yourself, but you have to be you, because if you just do this robotic, I am acting the part of a clinical psychologist, you won't establish that relationship. Something of you has to be there. I think also the thing about unconditional positive regard, people have to feel that they can say anything. So I worked at Citizens Advice, and when I did training, we used to shadow people. And there are 2 types of person. There's the person who said, right, what's your problem? Universal credit, debt, what have you. And there are other people who take some time to get to know the person, compliment their children or whatever, talk about the weather. And I'm the latter person. By instinct, I can never be the other kind of person. But that worked, because what you're saying is, I'm interested in you. You can trust me. You can say anything. And believe me, in a situation where some people had debt problems, they'd come in. They haven't got one problem. They've got a whole load of problems. They would bring things in carrier bags, and you say, "Is that all?" And they'd say, "Oh, I've just got this another carrier bag out." They may have money to drug dealers, they may have the landlord on their back, they may have domestic abuse. They won't trust you unless you give out this unconditional positive regard. I think also you need to challenge people as well. At a point in the relationship, you maybe need to challenge people's ideas or beliefs, or you can't just agree with people all the time. You have to have that element of challenge, I think. I think I had ERP, exposure response prevention therapy, in a group with somebody called Dr. Heather Sequeira, who's quite famous for dealing with OCD and post-traumatic stress disorder. And one of the things that was very good about her was that she set ground rules and she stuck to them. So I remember at one stage somebody wasn't speaking, and another person in the group said, "Oh, you're very quiet," or something. And she was on this person. She said, people contribute what they want, when they want, however they want, or not at all. And it's not up to us to be saying, "Oh, you should speak," or "You're quiet," or whatever. So I would say that. And I think the last thing, that's a lot of do's. I would say one of the don'ts is, don't have a checklist in your head. So sometimes I would think that's probably true of new trainees. They think, "I've got to introduce myself, make it clear I'm a trainee, confidentiality, the limits to confidentiality, I've got to cover that." And this is going on in your head, and you're ticking it off, like I'm maybe tick off my shopping list. And people pick that up. So I was actually talking to somebody who's a senior manager in the NHS yesterday in psychology, and I said, "Do many people ask for somebody else?" And she said, "Yes, sometimes." I said, "Oh, do they want a woman?" She said, "No, it's usually because they're ticking something off in their head, and the client realizes this and thinks it's not a proper therapeutic relationship." So that's me. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. That's wonderful. And yeah, thank you for sharing all of that with us. And it really relates very well to the competencies I think that we look for in our process as well. So yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Paul.
Yeah, hi, I'm Paul Graham, part of what used to be called Lupin, but it's now called LD Panda, and I can't remember what that stands for now. But anyway, we're basically people with lived experience. So I think it was it was definitely 1992. I joined the National Schizophrenia Fellowship after I became very, very unwell when I was 18 years old with psychosis. So I'd like to think I've made a pretty good recovery. What's interesting is I used to say I never had any professional help. I never actually saw a psychologist around that time. But that's not true, because what I did is I went to the library, the university library, and did quite a lot of reading. So I got a lot of my information really probably from psychologists. And I think in recent years, a lot of what I've learned from some of the things I've done, because I think it's about 8 years ago, I planned and hosted a mental health seminar at Burnley Football Club. One of the people who came to present, a chap called Andrew Grundy, spoke about the importance of service users being involved in their healthcare plans. So your role as a clinical psychologist is to ensure that that happens for them. Yeah, that's very, very important. I've done lots of talks, and I can talk for an hour, but I've only got a few minutes. So what I want to do is get to one of the very important parts of my talk, which is because I've been a public governor for the trust, and I became very aware of the high levels of sickness. And ironically, a lot of that is people's mental health. And as health professionals, you're actually quite vulnerable, because you're going to come across situations, so 90% of the time you're probably helping people. Yeah, and you're going to enable them to make a good recovery. But unfortunately, occasionally things are going to go wrong, and you might start blaming yourself. Yeah, there might be colleagues in your team that are struggling as well. So my thing is, there's something called the Wounded Healer Conference, if you want to look it up, and a guy called Dr. Mike Myers, not the actor, but he talks about how psychiatrists especially, have high rates of suicide. So what I'm saying to you is you've got to be resilient, but equally some of the qualities of compassion, etc., which are obviously important in clinical psychology, also actually make you quite vulnerable, because you are going to be caring, and if something goes wrong, it's going to get to you. So make sure you're talking to your colleagues. If you're feeling that that something's got to you, open up and talk about it. That's my advice. I hope that's helpful.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Paul. And yeah, it's just great to hear the sort of, I don't know, there's so many different things we could talk about, isn't there, on this topic of what qualities are important. So it's been really nice to have kind of some different perspectives there. But yeah, again, resilience is one of the things that we're looking for in our trainees, definitely. It is a really hard career. There's lots of support, and there's lots of sort of structures there to help people on that journey. But yeah, thanks for reminding us of that as well.
I'd just like to apologise as well. I'm going to go now, because I accidentally came in person. I didn't realise it was online.
Yeah, sorry.
So thanks to Rob for letting me sit with him and share the computer.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks so much, Paul, for that. That's brilliant. Oh, and I'm really aware that whenever we do this, we sort of have 5 minutes for each person who's speaking, and it's not very long really in the grand scheme of things, especially not when you're thinking about something as complicated as clinical psychology and clinical training. So thanks to everyone who's shared something today and shared a little bit of their experience or their journey. We've got around 15 minutes now to just take some questions. If anybody wants to put anything in the chat, put your hand up. Anything you'd like to ask us, either about, I suppose, Lancaster as a programme, the selections process, or anything for our trainees, staff, or indeed Karen as well. Shaz, go for it.
Hello, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my question is more about Sorry, I can't even hear myself because I've got the headphones on. So my question is more to do with age and application. Is there an upper age limit? Because I'm coming up to 62, so I thought maybe that would be off-putting. I mean, I'm definitely not planning on retiring anytime soon.
No, there's no age limits on it. It would be illegal
Yeah.
to do so, but it would be also completely against our values. So, yeah.
I was really hoping to hear that. And the other thing is that about the experience now, is life experience and lived experiences, are they taken into consideration as well as not having enough clinical experience? So yeah, life experience and lived experiences where you can really relate to people. I was just wondering if those things are accounted for, because even though I don't really have that much clinical experience, I did work in a research institute, but it was in the capacity of editing, scientific editing. But I have a very unusual list of lived experiences, and I would like to use those to help other people, really.
Yeah. If you have a look at the competencies that are on our website, you'll see that they're all generic, so they're not specific to clinical experiences. You can evidence those in any way you want. You can do that from a clinical point of view. You can do that from life experience. More life experience is going to give you a bigger range of places and a more depth of evidence for those competencies. So I would say that's a good position.
Thank you so much. And is it, sorry, just lastly, because I know there are other questions, would you be looking for a description of somebody's experiences and what they learned from it?
We'll be looking for the way that you respond to various situations that are put to you in the interviews, and how you, so the place where we're going to interrogate those experiences is more in the interview section rather than in the role plays. But obviously, your life experiences are going to influence the way that you interact and behave in the other parts of the interview.
Right. Okay. It does. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shaz. That's great. Thank you. Okay, just there's a couple of questions in the chat. So the first one is about placements and whether it's typical for people to request placement areas, for example, given a geographical location such as Cheshire. So yes, I guess often people do request that their placement is close to where they live, because obviously that makes sense, and we don't want people traveling a long way if they don't have to. However, as I sort of said earlier, the placements are organised, I guess, in collaboration with the other Northwest programmes. We also get different placement offers each time because, it depends on the availability of supervisors and services and things like that. So we could have one year where we've got lots of placements in one area, and then another year that's not the case. It just depends on sort of what gets offered to us, and also the needs of the people in the cohort and on the other programs as well. So there's an awful lot of stuff to sort of take into account when placements are being allocated. We do our very best to make sure that people don't have to travel that far. We do our best to think if somebody's travelled for one placement that we then wouldn't expect them to do it on another. However, we can't guarantee. So I would just say, unless people have kind of specific reasons why they need a close placement, so if you had kind of caring responsibilities or health needs or something like that, that would also then be obviously taken into account as well. We can't say for certain, I suppose, that a placement would be in a particular place, but we would do our best if that helps.
Yeah, and that would tie in with if you didn't have a car or access to a car or driving license, we'd obviously be looking at how you're going to get to those placements. Just in terms of general placement area, though, we run from Carlisle in the north down to sort of Chester, Blackpool to somewhere east. Pick somewhere east. Burnley, probably further east than that.
There's a question for Freya, if that's all right. I don't know if you feel sort of okay to answer that one. Sorry, you can probably see it.
Yeah, so So the first year I applied, I didn't do so great on the screening test. And the second year I did and got to interview. And I think maybe a couple of things that I'd factored into that. One was probably having done it the first time, I kind of knew how stressed personally I'd be about doing the actual screening test. I think as much as you can practice, doing the actual thing can feel quite daunting, but knowing what to expect probably helped. I was also just in a better place in like my life personally, so I was really enjoying kind of the work I was in, the friends I had about, my mental well-being was in a really nice place when I did the second application process, which I think helped me to take the pressure off, like the importance of it, because I had other things to focus on. And then whether or not there's any like kind of scientific evidence for this, but I did a lot of like brain games and Scrabble games and Sudokus, and I think in terms of the like flexible thinking, that probably really helped for the second application as well.
I just thought I would jump into this, like, and just say I didn't say it during my bit, but I was also my second year of applying to Lancaster, in terms of that question. And the first year I did come to interview and didn't get on the program, and then the second year I did. And I think the biggest difference for me was what Rob said during his section, was I was just more myself in the second time. I think the first time I applied, when I came to interview, I think I was very nervous. I came into it very much like a traditional interview expectations, and that probably kind of stunted me being myself during the interview process. Whereas in that second year, I came just as myself, a lot more open about myself, and I think that was probably the biggest difference for me.
Thanks so much, Andrew. It's really helpful.
I'll just pick up on two quick bits there. In terms of the screening test, people do ask how they can practice, what they should do. Should I buy these practice tests from some random supplier who wants 50 quid? The answer to that is no. The best thing you can do is just keep hammering away at the SHL practice tests. Familiarity with it is the big thing. There isn't any evidence that doing other stuff has any impact whatsoever, whereas familiarity does. But being relaxed has a big impact, which is why people who do it more than once and get used to how difficult it feels do better. And Andrew's absolutely bob on. Come and be yourself, and please don't come with a cloak of psychology on saying what you think we want to hear, because we don't want to hear what you think you want us to hear. I can't say that sentence. We just want to see the human being behind that stuff, because that's what's important. That was all.
Thank you very much. There's a question about, is it very unusual to apply straight from an undergraduate psychology degree? Do you want to answer that, Rob, or
Sure. It's fairly unusual, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is unusual to get a place on a program. So yeah, most people, because they spend a lot of time looking at the internet, decide that they're going to go off and do other stuff and get AP experience, because most people want to apply to more than one program. Because we're not looking at any of that stuff, it makes no difference for applications to Lancaster. What it will do, and this is going back to Shaz's question, you will have less general life experience, let alone clinical experience, so fewer examples to draw on. Yeah, but there's no reason really that someone couldn't get on straight out of undergrad. I'm trying to think of someone recently who's joined the program who has.
Yeah, I think we do have someone in first year who's not. Yeah, not. I think I didn't have much of a gap, and just to use myself, I wasn't that old when I started training, but I think try to do. I suppose my advice would be try and do some things alongside, I suppose, like your studies. So I've had a couple of like voluntary roles and jobs, and I guess try and have a think about that and what you've got from those experiences that you could then bring into training, because it's something you can kind of take from everything, I think, if you think about it. Yeah,
I'm obviously giving a really generic answer there, and everybody's situation is incredibly specific, and who knows what experience you bring. So.
Yeah. Okay, so what happens at the retest? Is it the whole process again?
Basically, yeah. So I just reset the test that person has taken back in start of February. So every time anyone takes the test, they get a unique set of questions because the question difficulty changes based on how you did on the previous question. That's why it always feels really hard. It's quite a battering experience because it pushes you right to the edge till you start getting stuff wrong, or it hopes you can get stuff wrong. It's fine to get stuff wrong. You can still get in like 99th percentile having got questions wrong. But yeah, you just sit there and go through the test again with whatever questions it throws at you at that point, and I get the results back straight away, and then we go, that was all fine, and then we have a chat about night stuff, like what the good pubs are in Preston.
Thanks, Rob. There's one about GBC status as well. If you're waiting for the GBC status from university, which has taken a while, would it be requested at interview or before?
Before. So as I said, we get all applications from the clearinghouse at the end of January. Our screening window opens the second week of February. Dates are on the website if you need a specific date. I would need that here at the uni before the screening window opened. So putting people through that screening costs us money. So we can't do that if we don't have evidence that you're eligible at that point. But you've got until the end of January.
A question about the role plays. So are both role plays non-clinical, or is the second one clinical based? I would say everything we do is not knowledge and skills based. We're not looking at kind of like clinical psychology knowledge or experience, but what we are looking at is the competencies that will help you to be a good psychologist, which are the ones that we're looking for. So they're not clinical examples, if that makes sense. We're not giving you like a clinical scenario and asking you to role play it. We are looking at skills that you would use as a clinician though, so things like communication. Yeah. Would you add anything to that, Rob?
No, that's bang on.
Thank you. Hopefully that helps. I know it's hard, but we obviously can't say too much about what they are.
We don't know what they are yet, that's why.
We don't.
Yeah.
They are in development. How do you prepare for the first and second interviews? There's so much variety in the process. Do people tend to perform better on some tasks than others? I don't know if any trainees have anything to add as well to that. Any?
I would say to a great degree you can't prepare in the way that many interviews would expect you to, because you need to come and be yourself, and our tasks are kind of designed to let you do that. It's not something where you can pre-prepare, I'm going to memorize this and read it out, and if you did you wouldn't do very well because it's obvious to us that you're doing that. That's that cloak psychology stuff again. We just want you to come and be you and think about your answers, reflect on what we're asking, and just answer honestly. It's not a pre-prepared interview. Yeah, what do you think, Stacey?
Yeah, no, yeah, would agree. I think it's really hard. I think we're looking for those 9 competencies, I guess, across the whole process. Some bits of it are going to tap in more to certain competencies than others, but try and think about what they are and what they mean and what that would look like. I don't think, like Rob said, there is a way that you can kind of like prepare as such. Maybe have a think about your life experiences, any work experiences, anything that you think has helped you develop as a person. Have a think about that, because if we ask you anything, it's going to be about experiences that you've had before, and everything else you just kind of do in live. So that's a chance for you to kind of show yourself and your kind of people skills, really. Yeah, people will perform better on some tasks than others, but that's reality, and that's okay. I can't say too much more, but we're looking at I guess how people do across the whole thing. Vicky?
I was just going to say, as well as thinking about sort of your experiences, particularly obviously being on the other side, interviewing, and it's also okay to think about things where things haven't gone well. So it's not all about bringing experiences that have just gone well. Things might have not gone well, either in life experiences or work experiences or academic experiences. So I guess just to say, when you're thinking about experiences, don't just think about sort of the ones where you think, oh, that had a great outcome. You can use other areas and things that might have happened in your life, experiences to draw on as well. That's
Thank you. That's great. Okay. We have 2 minutes left. Are there any last questions from anyone? Oh, the biggest challenges in placements. Trainees, would you like to answer this one?
I haven't experienced this personally, but I've heard that supervisors make an absolutely massive difference in terms of challenges. So I think like being able to communicate if there are difficulties with the supervisor, and also communicating that back to the uni and being able to like discuss and overcome any of those difficulties, I imagine would be quite a big challenge for people who've had difficulties with their supervisors.
Yeah, I think for me, mine might be a little bit unique, as I had a very different experience at the start of placements. I'd come from a role where I led the team, and going on to placement, that was a very different experience for me. And I think it took me a little bit of time at the beginning of placement to adapt to the new identity of being a trainee clinical psychologist. I think I'd still very much got like my manager head space in at the beginning of placement. But I think my experience of that is there was just some real great openness with my supervisor on placement, as well as my tutor at university, around kind of adapting into that new role, that taking a little bit of time, and also looking at what I needed to do during that time and what support could be offered during that time.
Thanks, Andrew. There's another question as well, which I'll just quickly go for, which is how do you effectively manage your time between placements and study?
So I'm an organised person, as we're currently on a group placement they learned yesterday. So I'm very structured. I like to have like my diary done like 6-8 weeks in advance, very know what I'm doing, what I'm going to fit in, and keeping it very structured. And that's very much how I keep to time and what I'm doing where.
I've found the study days currently to be enough time to get everything done. There has been the odd week where I've had things like ending letters for placements, which I might have taken some of my study time to do, because it had a deadline, and then discussed with my supervisor when to take that study time back in placement time. But that's been quite rare. I think there's kind of plenty of time with the study day to get everything done. And as long as you know kind of what deadlines are coming up and what needs to be done, there is enough time to do that.
Thanks, Freya. Rob, there's one question about reasonable adjustments that I thought that might be helpful for you.
Yeah, so as a standard, you don't need to provide any evidence. It's self-declaration. You will need to point out, if it's not really obvious, how the disability or the current issue is impacting on your ability to complete that online test. So a broken leg, obviously not really going to impact your ability to complete an online test. If you do have a report from educational psychologist that has a recommendation, then that needs to get sent through so that we can apply that. If you don't have anything like that for a particular disability, then we'll provide 20% extra time, which is what SHL recommend.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're at 2:30, which is I think when we were due to end, so we'll stop us there. But yeah, thank you so much everyone for coming, for listening. Thank you to everyone who shared their stories and experiences, I guess, as part of this, because I think it was really helpful for people who are applying to the programme to be able to hear from people who are here with us. And Karen and Paul, your input was just invaluable. I think really good advice for people to be thinking about and to sort of take on board if they're going to consider this as a career for them. So yeah, thank you so much.
I will pop the recording of this up on our website for people. And if anyone has other questions that pop into their head later on, do email us, declinsidemissions@Lancaster. It comes through to me, so I'll deal with it. But yeah, feel free to get in touch. We're always here to help.
Yeah, Absolutely. Thank you very much for your interest, and good luck if you do apply. All right,
you.
thanks everyone.